Hello and welcome to Coffee Lovers TV. On the show today, we're going to be having fun with the Behmor Brazen brewers. I've got both the brewers here. This is really going to be about the Connected Brewer, because really the only difference between these two brewers is this part here. So the Connected runs everything through an app on the phone. The old version just has your standard controls here. And you might be wondering, it's coffee, do we really need to be running a brewer through the app? Does it really need to be connected online? First of all, there's a whole separate conversation about need that I'm going to probably talk about in some other video. There are so many ways to brew coffee, so many really simple ways to brew coffee, that when you are getting a really nice machine, it's about the features and the benefits of those features and the design and the usability and all that sort of thing. I really like the app version of this machine. And I'm going to get into that right now. I have a brew going, but after the brew is done, you might be able to see this kind of starting to run. I'm going to show you through the app a bit, but there's some major benefits to having the app. That being said, the brewers are essentially the same. It's just the controls, and there are benefits that the app version has that this one doesn't from a controls perspective. But so while this is brewing, I'm just going to start kind of talking about the brewer. So the Behmor Brazen is a SCA certified coffee brewer. That means, and I've talked about this in other videos you've probably seen on the channel, that means that it's brewing within a certain set of parameters. It's producing a certain quality of coffee in the end. It takes actually a huge amount of rigor in design to get that specialty coffee certification. That's why you can't get a cheap brewer specialty coffee certified. The companies are getting more sophisticated with the production of them, but you're still spending a certain amount. And that's largely because the biggest component of a specialty brewer versus a cheap auto drip is the quality of the heating element, as well as, of course, how the water is distributed over the grounds and how it brews in the chamber and all that sort of thing. So, specialty coffee brewer, you know it's going to be producing a good quality cup of coffee. One of the things I love about the Behmor is that it is so simple. It's actually a really simple brewer, yet really elegant, I think, and different. You can already see from the design, this is quite different than most brewers. Most auto drip machines, they've got the tank kind of in the back, and the water goes down and heats up and then comes out and drips over a cone and then down into the carafe. I did that little demonstration at the beginning just so you could see that in this one, the water's up here in the top, gets heated to a precise temperature that you set. So number one, that's pretty cool. And then it drops down through a nice shower screen into the brewing chamber, which is here. The way I set that up with a paper filter, so you can use the standard 10-cup paper filters. These machines also come with a gold filter. More on that later. And then it drips down into the carafe from there. So very simple machine, just a very quality heating element that distributes the water nicely over the grounds and then into the brewing chamber, or into the carafe rather. Because of the simplicity of the machine, it's actually not that loud. You're probably hearing it right now because I'm sitting right next to it. The only sound of this machine is the water heating up, the agitation of the water as it heats up. And then soon you'll also be hearing the sound of the coffee dripping into the carafe below. So I've been using this machine for a while now, and it's really quite nice. While this is brewing, I'm gonna go over here and kind of top to bottom show you some features of the machine. So here's the carafe. It looks small. I think it's a pretty standard size carafe. With this machine, you can brew, you've got two kind of standard markings in the water chamber, and that's 900 milliliters and 1200 milliliters. So it's on the kind of lower end of the quantity that's typically brewed with an auto drip machine. Some of them you see go up to 1800 milliliters or more, but some of the machines that I've reviewed in the past are in this size range. So basically what I'm saying is this kind of looks small, but it actually can hold quite a bit. You can hold the full 1,200 milliliters brewed coffee, which I believe is 8 5-ounce cups of coffee. That's kind of how that's measured. On the carafe, I like it, feels good. It's easy to pour. I'm gonna do that shortly. It's got this enclosure. You don't need to fiddle with this at all. You just take this out and then pour straight away. It comes off easily. And this actually, it has a couple built-in sort of spouts so that the coffee comes into the top and goes through this little offshoot and then drips out here into the carafe. So there's this one little kind of nook and cranny here, and then when you're pouring, it goes through this out to the top. So there are a couple nooks and crannies in the cap, but I found it pretty easy to clean, so that's been nice. All right, the water's just about heated up here. Got 5 minutes left on the brew. You might be able to hear it gurgling. And the steam's coming out the top. This is one thing that I think is probably worth noting is that, and I'm not sure I've noticed this with other brewers, but a bit of steam will come off the top of this brewer as the water heats up. And what it's doing is it's getting the water to a boiling point and then I think settling it down to the approved temperature. So I set the brew temperature of this to be 205. And so it's targeting that temperature to brew. You can go from 190 to 210 as your brewing temperature setting for this machine. I'll get back to that in a moment. Okay, back to this carafe. So a couple nooks and crannies in the cap, but I found it really easy to clean. And the carafe itself is, standard stainless steel carafe. It's got a good opening. I can get in without too much trouble, and basically I found it reasonable enough to keep clean. There's one little lip on the inside here, which I can't show with photo or video. You can really only just feel it. I have some minor concern about that collecting stuff, but so far I haven't had any issues with it. I just get warm soapy water and a sponge and I clean this off every so often. After a typical brew, I'll just go with the rinsing and I'll do that for a little while. But once a week you probably want to give it a wash, maybe more often depending on how much coffee you make with it. Okay, so that's the carafe. It does keep the coffee hot for a long time. All right, now we're into the brew. Before I get into talking more details on that, I want to continue over here. So here's your brew chamber. So like I said, it comes with a gold filter. And you can also use the 10-cup, standard sort of 10-cup paper filters. I just got this at the grocery store. It's not like from this machine or anything like that, but it works just fine. And then the bottom is very simple. It's just this little stopper here that stops anything from dripping down when there's no carafe underneath. But otherwise, the coffee brews and drips through just fine. Benefit of using, or I guess the difference is, I should say, when you're using a metal filter like this, it's gonna let more oils through into the cup. So you're gonna get a cup with more body and also more oils. When you're using a paper filter, you're gonna get more of a crisper cup of coffee. I tend to like paper filtered coffee myself. So that's what I used brewing in here. I'm gonna see if I can maybe show you the shower screen on the video. Okay, so if that's coming out, you might be able to see there's several holes in the shower screen. It's a very large shower screen, and it just drops right into the brew basket. I mean, I've seen all number of different ways of the shower screens made for these auto drip machines. These specialty coffee certified machines, they all do it different ways. So I'm not sure there's a best way, since they all get that certification there. It seems to, just depends on how your brewer is made. One of the interesting things you can do with this brewer, I think they kind of started leaning away from it in the connected brewer, but with the manual one, there's this manual release mode. So you can actually put, like, this isn't a Chemex, so don't go by this measurement, but you can put a Chemex or a drip machine under here and use this shower head to brew with a manual brewing method, technically. So that's what this is for. The connected brewer actually lets you brew without the app. It's just with one setting. And to do that, you use this start-stop button, and it brews at 200 degrees with, I want to say it's a 45-second bloom time. So it'll let some water in and then bloom for 45 seconds and then brew. So you could remove this basket just like here. This is going to look exactly the same. Again, the only difference in appearance is this section here. And you could possibly brew on here with some other device, a Kalita Wave, a Chemex possibly. I haven't done that, so I don't know if that works on here. But according to the manual, you can do that with this machine. It's not really the intent. It's not really, I don't think it's intended to be a feature of the design. It's just something extra that you probably can do with the machine. Okay, and then of course the water tank is up top, and I'm very quickly going to show you that part here. So the water tank, you can see 3 lines. There's the 1200 ml line, then there's 900 ml, and then there's the calibration line. When you get the machine, you set it up first. It's going to have you do a calibration. It's going to bring the water to the boil, and it's just making sure, calibrating the sensors to make sure it can do the water temperature correctly. And that's the brew done, by the way. So the app kindly lets you know when your brew is finished. And that's the machine. Like I said, very simple. One thing that's important to note is that you do not want to put anything other than water up here. Never put anything other than water up here. Do not use vinegar to clean this machine. I'm going to do another video later on cleaning this machine, and there's a certain things that you can use to clean it, but you should not use vinegar. That's very important. It says that very clearly in the manual. Do not use vinegar to try to clean this machine. One more point of importance. This is just me, this is my opinion. So I noticed in the manual, they have little diagrams of filling up the water. And they actually fill up the carafe, and they have a diagram of the carafe pouring water into the top. I always think it's a terrible idea to use your carafe to fill the water tank of your brewer. Unless you're absolutely 100% sure it's totally clean, you could be getting other stuff into the water in your brewer. That just doesn't seem like a good idea. I think pouring water directly into there, if you have another water vessel or something like that, is a much better idea. Okay, so we brewed a cup of coffee while I was blathering on. So easy. I don't need to drink a whole cup of coffee right now. Thank you, brew ready. Okay. Brews a good cup of coffee, it definitely does. So before I get to the app, I just want to cover 2 points. The brew lines, I showed you the brew lines and the water level. It has these sort of standard settings of either brewing 900 milliliters of water or 1200. And according to the manual, this gives you 6 and 8 5-ounce cups of coffee, and that's kind of the standard way that cups are measured in terms of coffee. You can actually go all the way down and brew at the calibration line. That's 600 milliliters. And so you can do that, and it'll brew just fine. It's maybe possible to go lower than that, but from my research, it's not guaranteed that the temperature is going to work properly if you go below the calibration line in here. So if you're looking for a brewer where you can maybe brew 1 cup, that's very, very hard to find in an auto drip machine. You can go down to 600 mils water brewing, and that'll give you, I mean, the amount of coffee that gives you is probably gonna be in the neighborhood of 500, 550. That's a little more than 12 ounces of water. So kind of depends on how much gets stuck in the grounds. So that's just a point I wanted to bring up, because on the flip side, these brewers can't brew more than 1200. So I think the idea is that this is kind of for an individual who likes to drink multiple cups of coffee, or possibly 2 people who like to drink a couple of cups of coffee in the morning. Well, it gives you that kind of amount of coffee before you have to start brewing more cups. Now for me, a full carafe of this is actually more than I'll probably drink. So I think it's a pretty nice automated brewer to have for an individual. But I just wanted to point out that you can go down to 600, but probably not more than that. I like to follow the guidelines of 9 or 12 and work from there. On the ratios, so the manual has all the numbers written in them, but they're also in the app, which is really another great reason to use the app. So let's just dive into that. Like I said, with this machine, you can select the exact temperature that you brew at. between 190 and 210 degrees Fahrenheit. You can select the amount of bloom time. So the bloom is at the beginning of the brew, the machine will release a certain amount of water into the grounds to saturate the grounds, and then it'll let that sit, and the grounds are going to off gas and expand, and that's the bloom. You can do that from, I believe it's 15 seconds. I'm just going to check in here really quick. I believe it's 15 seconds all the way up to, 15 is the lowest you can go, and you can go all the way up to 4 minutes, I believe. So if you really want to, you can do a 4-minute bloom. Oh, 3 minutes, my apologies. So you can do a 3-minute bloom time. Now I typically do blooms between 45 seconds and 1:30 on this machine. For this brew right now, I did 1:15, just because I also brewed this coffee at 205 degrees. This is a Uganda from Conduit Coffee that I brewed a bunch using the regular Behmor at CoffeeCon in Seattle this summer. And it brings a lot of sweetness out in the coffee. It's really nice. If you're wondering why I used the regular one, I wasn't sure that I would have the proper connection to be able to use the app version. I'm going to get into that as well in a moment. Let me continue with the app. So, benefits of the app. Everything, I'm just going to try to walk through this from a base level. Let's go to the dashboard. So, when you open the app, if you're all connected and set up with the brewer, you're presented with this screen. You can go into your brewer. I believe the idea with this screen is that you can potentially have multiple brewers, but I don't know that that's a realistic setup for anyone. So go into your brewer, head to plus, and now you have 3 options here. On the left here, the brew is going to take you through some standard brewing settings. So you can select 6 or 8 cups. You can't select more or less than that. So that's at that 1200 mils level and 900 mils level in the water tank. So once you set that, it should also be noted that it actually has how much coffee you should put in up here. So you can see it shows you how much coffee they recommend, how much dose. So I've got 6 cups selected here, which is how much I brewed in here, and they recommended 47 grams of coffee. That actually comes out to about a 19-to-1 ratio. That's what I brewed this on. I did a sort of a medium grind, maybe a little medium coarse, and it's a smooth, sweet cup of coffee. So I recommend when you start off, follow their guidelines. I have experimented going down to 16-to-1. It takes a little adjusting of the grind size and that sort of thing. So I recommend starting with their guidelines. Okay, so we select the 6 cup, go to the next screen. Now, again, this is their sort of starting guidelines. You select packaged or fresh coffee. So if you're getting whole bean from a roaster, you're gonna go fresh. What this is doing, just for your edification in the settings, this is changing how long the bloom time is. For the fresh coffee, they do a longer bloom time because the fresher the coffee is, the more gas it's going to give off when the water hits it, so it needs more time to bloom. So fresh, and then the roast level. And changing the roast level changes the temperature it brews at. Generally, the lighter the roast, the hotter you want your water during the brew to extract all the compounds of flavor that you want from the coffee. And a lot of those in lighter roasts are acids and compounds that require higher heat in order to get out. So if you think about having like a fruity or bright citrusy coffee, or even a coffee with a lot of floral elements, those coffees require a lot more heat to brew with than normal. So I actually fiddled with this earlier. So I know that the light roasted is brewing at 204 degrees, the medium roast is at 200 degrees, and the dark roast is at 195 degrees. I actually found that brewing at a darker roast at a lower temperature creates a better tasting coffee, and that if you brew a high temperature, like if you brew a dark roast at 205 degrees, you're actually going to extract a lot of bad tasting things from that coffee. It's really interesting, but important to note. So this is a light roast. I actually, like I said, I brewed this at 205, but that's because I brewed with this coffee before and I liked it best there. And then it asks you if you want to brew now or later. Later lets you set a timer. So like any brewer, you can set this on a schedule and have it wake you up with fresh brewed coffee in the morning. It's really nice. Okay, I don't want to do this brew, so I'm going to cancel. So this is one of the, just getting into brewing this, one of the benefits of having the app is that it walks you through completely, step by step, the brew process. Okay, the next one we have here, so again, we're back to this screen, brew, buzz, craft. The brew is what we were just using. And it just takes you through a standard brewing process. This buzz gives you a bunch of preset options. So at the top we have the SCA certified brew. So that's actually the brew settings that give it the SCA certification. So you can just dive in and start using that right away. It's the same amount of dosage, and once you select your 6 or 8 cups, it just sets it up straight away. It doesn't take you through anything else. So this is like a fully preset brew. And what it's actually brewing is 6 cups, 207 degrees brew temperature, in a bloom of only 5 seconds. So it doesn't really bloom on that, which it's kind of interesting to me. I think when I do a longer bloom, when I really build that into the brew process, I end up with a sweeter cup of coffee. That's been my experience. And that's one of the reasons why I really like this brewer, not just because of the specific temperature settings that you can do, but also you can build in that bloom time. And if I find that a cup of coffee isn't as sweet as I want, I'll extend the bloom time and see if that helps. And oftentimes it does. Okay, I'm just back into the buzz settings with all those presets. They actually have a section, so that was SCA Brew. They have a section called Joe's Brews. Joe Beam is the owner and creator of the Behmor. So he has kind of his own takes on some options here. He has an African coffee preset, so if you're brewing with an Ethiopian coffee, you can just go in and try that out. I'm not going to go through and look at all the settings here. I just want to go through and tell you about these sort of presets. So he has a medium roast one and a dark roast one. And then they have some featured brew presets going through a Dunkin' Donuts Original Blend, Starbucks Cafe Verona, Starbucks Breakfast Blend, Starbucks Pike Place, Pete's Coffee and Tea, Big Bang. So I think these are like really commonly used roasts. So someone who's picking this up might be starting with something like that, and that'll give them a really good place to start. It's really interesting. I think I'm actually tempted to pick up maybe one of these Starbucks blends and see how it does using these presets. Okay, so that's actually really another fun feature about the app version is you have those pre-made presets for you, and you can also actually make your own presets. So, since we're on the subject of presets, if you go here, you go to favorites. I haven't done any because I just do it manually. But let's say I make what I just did a preset. So we go down to 6 cups, and I want it to be at 205, and I want a minute 15 because I really like this. And I'm just going to call this Conduit, it's a Conduit Coffee Roasters, Uganda, save. Your feature has been saved. Would like to run it now? No, I would not. So that ends up in the favorites. So I can go over to favorites, and now I can select the Uganda, brew now or brew later. I don't need to go through all the settings again. I can just do it. Okay, so now on to the last setting, we have craft. And this is where you get to do all of the custom settings for the brew. Now, you'll see here that you still can only do 6 or 8 cups. So that's, I mean, like I said, I tend to stick at that level. That's either the 1200 milliliters line or the 900 mils line in the water tank. Like I said, my understanding is you can go down to the calibration line and brew 600. If you were going to do that, if I was going to do that, I would probably select 6 cups here and just brew and see what happens. Okay, and here's where you can go and select your temperature. I said earlier you could go 190 to 210. It actually seems to go just to 208 and not any higher. One of the things that's kind of interesting, I think neat about having the app brewer here is that you can get updates to the brewer effectively. You can get updates to the app and how it functions, and they can update the firmware in here. So that provides some interesting, I think, opportunities to add features and that sort of thing. I'll get to that in a little bit, but the reason I said this is I thought the top temperature was 210, and now it's only letting me do 208, so I'm wondering if they changed that. The same with the bloom. I could have sworn I could do 4 minutes, and now it only lets me do 3. So let's say I want to brew at 208 for whatever reason. And the bloom time is between 15 seconds and up to 3 minutes. So as we saw earlier. So you select your temperature, you select your bloom time, and then you go to brew. Point of interest, since I'm on here, after you set your settings, it asks you if you want to brew now or later. When you select later, it'll ask you the time you want the brew to start. It actually starts heating up a little bit before that time, like 5 minutes or something like that, before the actual brew time, so that it can start brewing at the brew time. I believe that's how it works. I've used that setting a few times, and that's how it seems to behave. When you select now, it puts the settings in, and then goes to this screen where you're ready. You still have to say start brew. I'm not going to do that because there's no water in here and I already brewed the coffee. But that's your settings with the app. Really great, lots of features you can use. And to me, much more interesting and flexible than this version. They also have some built-in stuff. Amazon Dash, which I don't have connected because I don't like using that. But I think the idea with this is that you can connect Amazon Dash to your app and select like the coffee that you normally get. And then when you're getting low, you just hit a button in the app and reorder your coffee. I don't like that at all. I mean, I like getting my coffee from local roasters anyways. I don't like getting coffee off Amazon because it's usually been sitting in storage. The Dash could also potentially, you know, redo your filters when you need to, maybe get other stuff. That's an interesting thing that could lead to something useful in the future. I think it's possible for individual companies to get like their own Dash button. So if you have a roaster that uses that, maybe you can connect it in here. Like I said, I haven't used the Dash. I just know that it's in the app. I have no interest in it, so I haven't tried it out. There are some further settings here. You can change the name of your brewer. You can manually set your elevation. It kind of figures that out in the calibration though. Here's where the cleaning is, more calibration, some update, network setup, that kind of thing. One thing I'm not going to show on this video is how to get this set up, because now that I've told you all the things I like about the brewer, I want to touch on some of the more challenging things. The network setup thing is a little bit of a pain. I have to admit that. And sometimes that can be a little problematic. Now let me give you an example. Well, first off, let me explain how you set up. So when you first get this brewer, it's obviously not connected to your network. And the way this works is this phone is connected to this brewer through the Wi-Fi network that I have here. But how do you get that set up? Now, the walkthrough for it is pretty straightforward. It involves using this button. This is the DADO button, D-A-D-O button, DADO, I don't know. The way this works is at the beginning, the brewer actually creates its own little Wi-Fi network. The app connects to the brewer. You then put in your network settings for your Wi-Fi network. One of the small annoyances in doing this is you have to type everything out. As far as I found, it doesn't detect, at least it wasn't ever able to detect my network, so I had to write out the network name, then of course write out the password, and then it'll connect, and it does seem to handle that process pretty well. Just to go through it from beginning, you plug this in for the first time, you do this setup, the DADO setup, it creates a Wi-Fi network. You connect to that Wi-Fi network on your phone, then you go into the app and go through the step-by-step setup process, which involves setting up the network settings. Once you've done that, the app instructs the brewer to connect to the network. The phone and the brewer disconnect for a moment. Once the brewer is connected to the network, the app then sees, as your phone reconnects to your network, the app then sees the brewer and makes the connection, and then you're good to go. And as long as nothing changes with your network, you're fine. You can turn the brewer off. You can have it unplugged for a long time. That's actually what I've been doing. I've had this unplugged for about 2-3 weeks now, or longer, maybe a little over a month. Plug it back in, works just fine. So I've actually had 2 challenges with this that were really kind of frustrating. The first happened when I changed my Wi-Fi network. So in order to do that, I basically had to just reinstall everything and reconnect the brewer straight up. The second problem I had is when I upgraded my phone, and for whatever reason, because when you get this app for the first time, you have to make an account. And I think the idea is that your settings and everything gets saved to your account, so you can use multiple devices. Like I could log into this app on another phone. You know, if someone else in my home wants to use the brewer, they don't have to come get my phone and use the app on my phone. They can have the app on their own phone, log into the same account, and just connect and use the brewer right away. Because the brewer's all set and connecting to the network. The app just needs to log into your account, connect to the brewer, etc. So when I upgraded my phone, for whatever reason, I couldn't log into the account. I had to delete the app, remake a new account, and do the whole thing all over again. But in the interim, when I was trying to connect and the phone was seeing the brewer, it was a mess. It was a mess. So, and The reason why it was actually really annoying was because I was trying to brew coffee at the time and I couldn't. I had to deal with this app thing. So the lesson learned was make sure that the brewer is properly set up before I need to brew. If you do anything to change your Wi-Fi network, double check your brewer. If your phone upgrades or anything like that, double check your app setup. That has so far been the only real major annoyance. And now that it's set up, I have no problem. I'm gonna have to do this again. I'm about to move to a new apartment. I'm gonna have to set this all up again, and that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna make sure, long before I need to brew any coffee with this thing, that the app setup is connected. Once that's done, it's great, everything runs fantastic, and I love it. Another point of interest, and this is something that I've emailed in about, maybe they will fix it, maybe not. This light, it is really bright at night. Now, maybe this isn't a problem for most people. Here in this space, I live in a studio apartment. It lights up my entire apartment at night. I've actually taken to putting tape over this. There's no way to turn the light off. Maybe that's something they can change in the future. Considering that the light goes on and off and it changes colors, I imagine maybe they can do a firmware update to put something in the app to turn off the light. I know other people have commented on that. Right now though, as long as the brewer is plugged in, this light is on in one capacity or another. It's another reason why I often unplug the brewer for extended periods of time when I'm not using it. So just a point of interest there. And the last thing that I've experienced that was a little finicky, when I did the calibration at the beginning, right after calibration, you can't brew. So I did the calibration, when I set up for the first time, and then I went to make a brew. It said the temperature was too hot. And I think that's just what happens right after calibration. So keep that in mind. When you get the brewer for the first time, you're gonna need to calibrate, and then you might need to wait a little bit. I honestly don't know how long I waited. It might have been, I think after not being able to brew 10, 15 minutes, I just walked away completely and came back later, an hour or more later, and then I was able to brew. So I think just when it calibrates, it's getting the brewer really hot and it needs to cool down so that it can control the temperature properly. So that's been the Behmor Connected Brewer. Really enjoying it. I think I have a lot of coffee brewers I really like. I think so far, this is really high at the top of my list of my favorites of brewers at home. I like the coffee that it makes. I like the usability. I enjoy the interface of the app, being able to select the temperature, the bloom time, being able to kind of play with the brewing, do these variables. And also, I like how it looks. I like how it sits on the counter. It's a nice brewer. It's a good one. If you have any questions about the Behmor brewer, the Connected, or the regular, like I said, they brew the same. The Connected just has more features through the app than the standard brewer. And the price is really good. I think on Amazon right now, this is maybe $150 and this is $170. I think for most people, you're gonna wanna go with the Connected Brewer unless you really, really don't like the idea of using the app, or of course, if you don't have reliable internet or something like that. But if those are not an issue, that's a good one. So I'm gonna link to everything below, of course. If you have any questions about the Behmor Brewer, please leave your comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.